A bit lazy, aren't we? That was the entire message. 6 words, no greeting, no sign-off. Just the kind of digital slap that lands harder because it's so smugly casual. It was 7:42 a.m. when I opened it, still in my robe with black coffee cooling beside my laptop and last night's compliance report blinking back at me on screen like it had something to apologize for. The message came from Janice, our CFO, queen of brittle smiles and heirloom resentment. She copied her son Wade, our limp handshake of a CEO whose biggest career achievement to date was being born to someone with a spreadsheet fetish and a trust fund. I stared at the email for a full minute, read it again, took a breath, then clicked open Slack. The private channels were already lighting up. Someone dropped a popcorn emoji. Another posted a gif of a cat getting smacked off a counter. They didn't say my name, but I could feel it like smoke under a closed door. You don't need to hear laughter to know when you're the punchline. The thing that really chapped my ass, this wasn't even about the message, it was about the timing. Janice sent it less than 12 hours after I flagged a compliance discrepancy buried in the acquisition report. A small one, a footnote really, but one that mattered, and one that, if left untouched, could bite us square in the ass during final due diligence. It wasn't the first time I'd caught something the rest of them missed. I'd spent 8 years at Stonecliff Analytics cleaning up other people's near misses before they became full-on disasters. My official title was Strategic Systems Integration Specialist, which basically meant I was the duct tape between departments. If something broke, I fixed it. If someone forgot, I reminded them. If legal screwed up the language, I red-penned it before the buyers could. But credit, nah, that always slid right into Janice's lap, like a trained golden retriever. That's why this stung more than it should have, not because she called me lazy. I've been called worse by clients, by vendors, by that one regional sales manager who used to microwave tuna in the break room and blame it on me. No, it stung because it was so stupid, so petty. A CFO, 1 week out from closing a $150 million acquisition, has time to mock someone in writing for doing their actual job? I didn't reply, just stared at the screen, sipped my cold coffee, and let the heat crawl up my neck. Then I took a screenshot, just one, clean. No timestamps cropped out, no edits, just truth frozen in pixels. I clicked open a private folder I'd been quietly adding to over the last few months, named it Clause 4B, dropped the screenshot in. Then I got up, showered, got dressed, and drove in like it was any other Tuesday. In the office, no one looked me in the eye. Wade walked past my desk with that same smug cluelessness he always wore, humming like he was the star of his own movie. Janice didn't come in that day, working remotely, which was her code for wine in a Yeti tumbler and passive-aggressively rewriting press releases from her kitchen island. The Slack chatter died by noon, replaced by recycled memes and a debate over whether the catered wraps for tomorrow's investor lunch should be gluten-flexible. No one said a word to me about the email, which made it worse, like being sucker-punched in a crowd and watching everyone pretend they didn't see it. At 3 o'clock, Wade called a team check-in. Zoom, of course. Janice dialed in late and made a show of sorry, bad Wi-Fi, even though she lives in a gated community with fiber faster than our internal servers. I sat through the whole thing in silence, nodding at the right moments, adding notes to the shared doc, pretending I hadn't been professionally slapped across the face in front of half the leadership team that morning. When it was over, I muted myself, leaned back, and stared at the ceiling. My heart had stopped racing, but something else had taken root, something deeper, colder. Because here's what Janice didn't know. She thought she was throwing a dart for laughs. But the dart hit something real, something in the contract. And if she'd actually read Section 4B of the acquisition agreement, hell, if Wade had read more than the headlines in his own PowerPoint, she'd have realized something terrifying. You don't call a key person lazy. Not when the clause explicitly states that any documented effort to undermine, diminish, or obstruct the function of designated key personnel without buyer consent constitutes a material breach. And guess who's listed by name in Section 4B? Me, Sophia Caldwell. So no, I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I didn't send a sarcastic reply or ask to be looped in on the joke. I just sat there, calmly sipping fresh coffee, while the fuse they lit earlier that morning quietly crept toward the deal they thought was untouchable. 3 days later, I realized I'd been erased. It started small, subtle, like a typo you keep skimming past. A meeting invite I never got. A progress update that showed up in Slack with no mention of the system I'd built from the ground up. Wade's tone on the morning call shifting from his usual bumbling to something smug and assured, like he finally understood the words coming out of his own mouth. Which he didn't, because they weren't his, they were mine. I wrote that financial strategy deck in a marathon 12-hour sprint after the first buyer exploratory call. I remember, because I pulled an all-nighter with nothing but leftover chili and 2 Red Bulls, mapping out contingency flowcharts, while Wade took selfies at some rooftop bar with a caption that said CEO Life smiling face with sunglasses. Janice called the slides a decent skeleton, and then sat on them for 6 weeks before the board even saw them. Now here we were, 7 days from signing, and my name was nowhere. The first hard hit landed in the form of an internal press draft that someone accidentally attached to a Slack thread meant for leadership eyes only. I opened it on instinct, saw the subject line, for immediate release, Stonecliff Acquisition, and my stomach dropped. There it was, in black and white, a glowing paragraph about the visionary leadership of CFO Janice Penwell, whose financial acumen guided Stonecliff through an unprecedented era of growth and positioned the company as an optimal partner for enterprise integration. Visionary leadership, financial acumen, no mention of Sophia Caldwell, not even a throwaway line, not even a typo of my name that I could pretend was an honest oversight, just absence, a black hole where 8 years of my work had disappeared without a sound. I didn't say anything, didn't forward it, didn't comment. I just stared at it for a long time, my ears roaring with a rage so quiet it felt like it lived in my bones. This wasn't an accident, this was subtraction. The kind of clean erasure that happens when people with power decide you're inconvenient. I wasn't loud. I didn't demand credit or claw for status. I was background, efficient, reliable, non-threatening. And that made me disposable the moment the spotlight showed up. Wade called me later that afternoon, said he just wanted to sync up before the buyer's final walkthrough. His voice was casual, a little too casual, the kind of tone people use when they know they're walking on landmines but pretend it's just wet grass. I looped in Janice on the latest numbers, he said. She's going to take point on the Q&A. Buyers really respond to her leadership voice. Leadership voice? Janice's leadership voice sounded like a disappointed fourth-grade librarian. I didn't argue, just said, okay, I'll be there. But when the next calendar invite came through, buyer final prep leadership only, my name wasn't on it. I checked the recipients. Janice, Wade, Chloe from legal, Brent from biz dev. Hell, even Rick, the VP of marketing, who once asked if Net30 was a dating app, made the cut, but not me. I clicked back to my folders. Opened clause 4B. Stared at the screenshot of Janice's lazy girl jab, just sitting there like a loaded chamber. Then I pulled up the full acquisition contract and searched for the language I only half remembered from the late-night drafting sessions. There it was. Section 4B. Key personnel: the buyer considers continuity of operations essential to post-acquisition integration. Any material modification to the roles, visibility, or influence of designated key personnel, particularly without buyer consultation or approval, shall constitute a breach of contractual expectations and provide grounds for renegotiation or withdrawal. And under designated key personnel, in line 3, just beneath Wade's legally inherited title and Janice's self-appointed glory, my name. Sophia Caldwell, Director of Strategic Systems Integration. I leaned back in my chair. The hum of the office around me felt suddenly far away, like I was watching it all underwater. Phones ringing. Footsteps. Laughter in the hallway. None of it touched me, because here's the thing about being erased. It only works if no one notices you were there to begin with, but I noticed. And so would the buyers, so I copied that line, snipped the clause, saved it beside the screenshot. Then I opened a new email. To Primary Counsel at Brecht and Harlow LLP, the legal firm representing our buyers. Subject: Internal Conduct Re. Key Personnel: Sophia Caldwell. Attached screenshot. Redacted notes. Section 4B excerpt. Body. For your awareness, please advise if further clarification is needed prior to formal closing. I didn't CC Wade. I didn't warn Janice. I didn't forward it to HR or flag it in Slack like some performative martyr. I just pressed send. Then I sat there in that buzzing office full of half smiles and canned laughter and watched the window reflect a woman no one was looking at. But they would. Soon. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay in bed with my laptop closed, the screen still glowing faintly in my mind like a brand. The clause, the line, the cold confidence of it, any attempt to undermine, reassign, or diminish a key person without written buyer approval shall be considered grounds for immediate contract withdrawal. I repeated it like a prayer. Like a weapon I wasn't sure I had the stomach to use. Because let's be honest, I wasn't the kind of woman who threw grenades. I was the one patching bullet holes behind the scenes, making sure the bodies didn't pile up. I knew every leak in Stonecliff's hull. I'd sealed them all myself. I was the quiet fix, the backstage ghost, the person everyone relied on without realizing they were relying on me. And maybe that was the real mistake, mine. I thought if I worked hard enough, if I kept my head down, if I didn't ask for a bigger title or a bonus that actually matched the hours I burned, someone would eventually say, you matter. But Janice said something else. A bit lazy, aren't we? I opened the folder again, clause 4B. I had renamed it twice that night, first to contingency, then to insurance, and finally, bluntly, to firestarter. There were 3 files now: the screenshot of Janice's email, the full contract clause with my name highlighted, and a Word doc I had drafted and redrafted, short, simple, and surgical. I wasn't writing a manifesto. I wasn't here to vent. I was here to trigger a clause with precision. And if I'd learned anything from 8 years cleaning up other people's messes, it was this: truth, when timed correctly, didn't need to be loud. It just needed to be documented. I opened my Outlook, not the company instance, my personal encrypted account. It was 3:26 a.m., but I'd already checked the time zone. The partner at Brecht and Harlow would be in his office in Chicago by 7 o'clock. I wanted my message sitting at the top of his inbox when he poured his first coffee. 2. Samuel D. Hunter, legal partner, Brecht and Harlow LLP, subject. Internal undermining of key person designation, Stonecliff Analytics. Mr. Hunter, please find attached documentation relevant to the treatment of a listed key person within the acquisition framework. The following message, attached, was sent by Stonecliff's acting CFO following the submission of a legal compliance flag related to financial disclosures under review. My role and designation are outlined in Section 4B of the Working Agreement, as per the attached excerpt. This communication, as well as the broader pattern of exclusion I have experienced in the past 2 weeks, removal from meetings, suppression of authorship, and exclusion from leadership briefings, may represent a material deviation from agreed expectations of continuity and integrity. Please confirm receipt. I remain available should clarification be necessary. Regards, Sophia Caldwell, Director, Strategic Systems Integration, Stonecliff Analytics. No exclamation marks. No apology for bothering. No emojis, no fluff, no pleading. Just facts bound in legal context, framed by calm. I double-checked the attachments. The email from Janice with that smug little sentence, "A bit lazy, aren't we?" bold and time-stamped. The clause from the contract with my name clearly listed, the language circled in red, diminish key person voids agreement. And finally, a list I had compiled, 10 bullet points, each with a timestamp and evidence of my exclusion. Calendar invites I never got, Slack threads I was removed from, drafts I wrote and others signed, a trail like bloody footprints across white tile. I hit send, then I closed the laptop, stood up, and walked to the kitchen. The sky was just starting to lighten behind the blinds. I poured the last of the wine down the sink. It tasted like old guilt, like silence, no more of that. They wanted to erase me. They made the mistake of thinking I was a scribble in pencil, something they could rub out without consequence. But the contract was in ink. I was a clause now, a clause with teeth. A clause that, if triggered, could collapse $150 million in one sharp breath, and I just pulled the pin. My badge stopped working on Wednesday. Not entirely, just in the East Wing. The conference room hallway, the analytics vault, mezzanine offices where they were staging the integration team ahead of next week's buyer walkthrough. I tapped my keycard 3 times outside the main glass door, watched the red light blink back like a middle finger, then smiled. They didn't even bother to tell me. I stood there for a moment, holding my coffee in one hand, badge dangling stupidly in the other, and let the silence stretch. Then I turned on my heel and walked calmly back to my desk, past the new hires who looked at me like I was a ghost haunting their shiny ergonomic chairs. Wade was in the break room, laughing at something on his phone. Probably another TikTok he didn't understand but reposted anyway with some caption like "CEO grindset briefcase fire." I nodded as I passed him. He didn't meet my eyes. I didn't need a confrontation. I just needed a pattern. And now I had one: loss of access. No meeting invites. My edits removed from final decks. A spreadsheet I created 6 months ago, now circulated with someone else's initials in the footer. One of the interns even asked me if I was still working on the acquisition stuff or just doing transition support now. Transition support. That's what they thought I was, an extra set of hands to box up the real work for Janice to carry across the finish line like some conquering hero. That night, I stayed late, not in the office. That wasn't an option anymore. I logged in from my apartment, where the silence was cleaner and the lighting didn't buzz like a mosquito in my ear. I opened a spreadsheet labeled Exclusion Timeline. Every row was an act of quiet aggression. Every column a date, a file path, a name redacted. Deleted invites. Slack comments mysteriously vanishing. Comments on a doc turned to resolved without ever being addressed. I cross-referenced everything against my email logs, download histories, and timestamps. If Janice wanted to ghostwrite me out of the deal, she'd have to do it over my evidence. By 1 a.m., the file was 17 tabs deep, color-coded, synced to a private, off-network backup. My own little war journal. And still, I didn't speak. Not to Wade, not to HR, not to the legal team who'd once asked me to translate Janice's style when she sent emails in all caps and Latin aphorisms like she was Caesar himself. Not even to Chloe, the only person left in that building who treated me like a human being and not a placeholder. Because this wasn't a fight anymore. This was observation. The morning after, I sat in on the investor call from my laptop at home. The camera was off, mic muted, name dimmed in the corner like a shadow no one acknowledged. Janice smiled her crocodile smile through the whole meeting, flanked by Wade in a tailored blazer he absolutely borrowed from someone more qualified. They presented my projections. They walked through my system mapping. And then Janice, bless her botoxed heart, said it. I'd love to thank the team that helped bring this together, especially Rick and Brent for shepherding the financial strategy into its final form. No mention of me, not even a generic the broader team. Just Brent, whose idea of a forecast is dragging a cell to the right until the numbers look ambitious enough for the board. I took a screenshot mid-zoom. Janice's face paused mid-smirk, Brent blinking like a deer in Excel headlights. I added it to the Firestarter folder. Later that day, I got a ping in Slack. Wade Penwell right arrow Sophia Caldwell hey, just looping you out of the Thursday prep. Janice wants to keep the team lean. No worries, it's just optics before the walkthrough, just optics. I stared at the message so long the timestamp grayed out. I replied with a thumbs up emoji, nothing else, just a floating neutered gesture that said I saw you. I see all of you. Then I opened a new doc and started typing. Subject, timeline of role diminishment Sophia Caldwell to, regulatory compliance officer, confidential draft, I didn't send it. Not yet. But it sat there, breathing like a living thing. They thought I was frozen out, that I'd been benched. But they forgot that quiet doesn't mean blind, and silence isn't surrender. You can build a guillotine out of receipts, and I was stacking the wood, one documented slight at a time. The conference room smelled like fresh printer toner and nerves wearing expensive cologne. They'd reserved the 17th floor executive suite, dusted off the fancy coffee carafes, even dragged in one of those sad fruit trays nobody ever touches. Everything screamed, look how legitimate we are. I walked in 5 minutes early, unnoticed, quiet, dressed in navy slacks and a black blouse I'd ironed twice but still felt invisible in. They didn't invite me, not officially. Chloe from Legal had forwarded the calendar link 2 nights prior with a single sentence. Thought you might want to sit in. No fanfare, no welcome. I wasn't on the agenda. I wasn't even seated at the table. Just one of the chairs pressed up against the glass wall, lined like an audience of ghosts. Janice floated in 10 minutes late, of course, wearing white like she was here to baptize the damn deal herself. Wade followed close behind, holding a manila folder like it contained ancient secrets instead of printed PDFs he didn't understand. The buyer's team had already arrived, 2 execs from Frankfurt, 1 from New York. Their lead legal counsel, Samuel Hunter, sat at the head of the table, flipping through his notes with deliberate calm. I watched them all like I was underwater. It felt surreal. Surreal that no one was asking why I was here. Surreal that no one noticed I was the only person who didn't get a nameplate. Surreal that the coffee cups had initials written in black marker, except mine. Janice opened the meeting with her usual performance, gratitude, vision, strategy. Every line was a reheated version of things I'd written, spreadsheets I'd built, workflows I'd mapped. Wade chimed in now and then with rehearsed nods and phrases like client-focused synergies and infrastructure resilience that made the buyers smile politely. I sat still, my hands folded in my lap. Then Janice did what Janice always does. She looked at me, not directly, just over her shoulder with that glassy-eyed smirk she used when she was about to spit a sentence dipped in battery acid. Let's not keep them waiting, she said, gesturing toward the buyers with a clap of her manicured hands. Some of us move at full speed. A soft chuckle floated across the table. The German VP smiled politely. Wade let out a single dry laugh like he wasn't sure if it was a joke or a cue. No one looked at me, but I could feel it. Red flush climbed my neck. I didn't flinch. I didn't react. I just watched the steam rise from the untouched coffee in front of me like I was somewhere else entirely, and then it happened. Samuel Hunter's associate, a young woman in a navy suit with a silver pen tucked behind her ear, tilted her head as her phone buzzed beside her notebook. She glanced down, frowned, opened her laptop, began typing. Janice kept talking. The associate typed faster, and then she stopped. She looked up, her expression didn't change. She didn't gasp or shout or make a scene. She simply closed the laptop, leaned over to Samuel, and whispered something in his ear. He paused, looked at her, then at me, then at Janice. He nodded once. Apologies, he said, standing up. If you'll excuse me for a moment. The room stilled. No one moved. Janice blinked. Is everything all right? Samuel didn't answer. Just walked out with the associate right behind him. Laptop tucked under her arm like a sealed verdict. Janice stood awkwardly for a beat, half smiling, then slowly lowered herself back into her chair. I'm sure it's just a last-minute clarification, she said. Her voice was still sugar, but there was a crack in it now. A hairline fracture only the observant would catch. Wade cleared his throat, fiddled with his folder. The projector hummed softly, casting a blue glow over the table. No one spoke. I stayed still in my seat against the wall, didn't smile, didn't blink. I had sent the email 40 minutes ago, scheduled delivery. Subject line, Section 4B internal conduct, time sensitive, 3 attachments, 1 truth, they had it now, and I had a front row seat. The door opened with a soft click that hit like a gunshot. Samuel Hunter stepped back into the conference room holding a short stack of printed pages and a neutral expression so polished it felt weaponized. Behind him, the associate followed, face unreadable, eyes scanning the room like a silent sentry. Neither looked rushed, neither looked panicked. But something had shifted. Janice straightened in her chair with a rehearsed smile that didn't quite meet her eyes. All set? Almost, Samuel replied smoothly, his voice even. Almost pleasant. Would you mind switching the projector input to HDMI? He gestured toward the tech rep at the far end of the room who scrambled to comply. The screen went black, then flickered to life, displaying the familiar Windows desktop of a legal laptop. A few icons. A folder titled Stonecliffe Acquisition Diligence Final, then a PDF. No one said anything. He clicked it open. Pages loaded, headers, footers, the full contract. Janice adjusted the collar of her blazer, visibly trying to read upside down. Wade leaned forward slightly, his lips twitching into what might have been a smile if he weren't so clearly out of his depth. Samuel didn't speak right away. He navigated to a bookmark section and scrolled, slowly, deliberately, before stopping on page 37. At the top, bolded and underlined, Section 4B, Continuity and Designated Key Personnel, and below it. Paragraph so familiar to me now, I could have recited it in my sleep. The buyer considers the uninterrupted function of designated key personnel to be foundational to integration post-closing. Any attempt to reassign, reduce, interfere with, or otherwise undermine said personnel, without buyer's written acknowledgement and approval, shall constitute material breach and grounds for immediate withdrawal of offer. Room went so still you could hear the tick of the wall clock above the whiteboard. Samuel continued, his tone as measured as ever. We received a communication this morning from a member of your leadership team that raises several concerns about compliance with this clause. He clicked once more. My email filled the screen. Subject, Section 4B Internal Conduct, time-sensitive, below it, my name, my title, my signature block. The attachments were listed along the bottom. Screenshots, Slack timestamps, a PDF clip from the contract. He scrolled to the first attachment, and there it was, Janice's email. A bit lazy, aren't we? Bold, time-stamped, copied to Wade. I watched Janice from the corner of my eye. Her face didn't move, but I saw the twitch in her left jaw, just a flutter, like the mask was starting to slip. Wade leaned back in his chair and blinked twice, like he was trying to load a new reality that kept buffering. Samuel zoomed in on the contract again. The clause, my name, there it was. Sophia Caldwell, Director Strategic Systems Integration, key personnel, right there? In print, in pixels, inescapable. He looked up finally, eyes sweeping the table, settling on no one in particular. This clause is quite clear, he said, flipping the pages slowly as if pacing his words. The documentation we've now reviewed suggests multiple decisions were made that materially affect Miss Caldwell's ability to perform her designated role, including exclusion from leadership briefings, reassignment of work product without attribution, and derogatory internal communications. He turned his gaze toward Janice, not accusatory, just factual. We were not informed of any of this prior to this morning. No one said a word. Only sound was the air vent humming overhead. Janice blinked, once, twice. Then she cleared her throat. Surely this is, she started, but Samuel held up a hand, not rudely, just enough to stop her words mid-flight. I'll reserve judgment until final clarification is made. For now, I'd like to pause the current agenda. We will need to confer privately with counsel and internal regulatory. He turned back to the tech rep. You can disconnect the feed. Screen went dark. I sat there, still against the wall, no nameplate, no coffee cup. My hands remained folded in my lap, no gloating, no smirk, no reaction. But inside me something shifted, not victory, not yet, just the first crack in their illusion that I didn't matter. And once it starts to crack, it only goes one way. Section 4B, Samuel began again, this time slower, deliberate, his voice dropping just enough to make every syllable land with weight. States that any undermining of key persons without buyer approval. He clicked the mouse and the projector flared back to life, illuminating the contract again. The cursor hovered over the clause like a spotlight waiting for the next act. Invalidates the agreement. The final word echoed through the room. Not loud, just final. Janice looked like she'd swallowed glass. Wade's mouth opened slightly, as if to speak, but no sound came. Across the table, the German exec. Reinhardt, I think, raised one eyebrow, the kind of microscopic expression that usually precedes multi-million-dollar disasters. Samuel zoomed in with two slow clicks. First, my signature on the email. Sophia Caldwell, Director Strategic Systems Integration, designated key personnel then, Janice's message. A bit lazy, aren't we? Still bold, still sharp, still copied to Wade. Samuel's expression didn't shift much, but there was something about the way his mouth curved at the edge, like the slow pull of a drawstring bag closing. You didn't think we wouldn't verify internal compliance? He said finally. It wasn't a question, it was a funeral bell. Janice blinked. Her lips parted, but no defense came. Her eyes darted to Wade, who looked like a sophomore caught plagiarizing in front of the dean. He coughed into his hand, then fiddled with the corner of the folder he'd been pretending to read for the last 20 minutes. Mr. Hunter, Janice said, trying for composure, I think this is being misinterpreted. It was a joke. He raised one finger gently. Let's not do that. She stopped. The associate beside him flipped open her own binder, pulling a tabbed folder labeled Personnel and Continuity. She slid it across to Samuel, who didn't even look, just placed his hand on it like he already knew what was inside. We've been monitoring internal changes since the draft execution, he continued. Every personnel shift, every role reassignment, every Slack thread, every redlined version of your internal rollout documentation. He turned the pages again, and we flagged the early signs weeks ago. This, he tapped Janice's message on the screen, simply confirms our analysis. In writing. Janice looked like she was about to stand, but thought better of it. Her hands were folded too tightly. Her voice, when it returned, was quieter. Sophia was never meant to be front-facing during the closing period. Her role was her role, Samuel interrupted, eyes narrowing, was defined in Section 4B, which you co-signed. The screen split. On the left, the contract clause with my name highlighted. On the right, a timestamped log of removed calendar invites, absence from buyer briefings, my revoked access logs, the Slack deletions, the press draft that omitted me entirely. One by one receipts, I remained still, every inch of me resisting the instinct to react, to smile, to gloat, to anything. But this wasn't my scene to steal. The contract was speaking now, and it was saying everything I'd swallowed for the past month. Chloe from legal finally spoke up, her voice thin. Is there any path to resolution? Samuel didn't look at her. Was still watching Janice. That depends on how transparent your leadership is willing to be today. A beat passed, then another. No one moved, the silence was deafening. A room designed for celebration had become a courtroom, and the jury was watching the guilty shuffle their papers, trying to invent innocence where none remained. Wade, to his credit, or maybe just out of fear, finally leaned forward. What happens next? Samuel closed the laptop. The screen went black again. We're pausing the signing, effective immediately. Janice inhaled sharply. Pending internal review and further regulatory consultation, he added. That includes a full compliance audit of personnel decisions made since the initial MOU. Another beat, then he turned to me. For the first time all meeting, the room acknowledged I was there. His voice softened. Miss Caldwell, I'd like to speak with you privately. When you're ready. I nodded once, nothing else. He stood. So did the associate. The buyers followed without a word, polite but cool. Janice remained seated, blinking hard, jaw clenched. Wade sagged into his chair like the air had been sucked out of him. The door shut behind them. And just like that, the room that had treated me like an afterthought was now filled with nothing but the echo of my absence. Janice broke first. It wasn't dramatic, no sobs, no table-pounding tantrum. That wasn't her style. Her version of unraveling was far more pathetic. A slow, calculated denial pretending to be grace under fire. As soon as the buyers cleared the room, she turned to Chloe from legal with a smile that made my skin crawl. Well, this is obviously a misunderstanding. Samuel's team will calm down once we clarify roles. Chloe didn't respond. Just stared at her the way someone might watch a raccoon try to open a padlocked dumpster. Janice turned next to Wade. Looked like someone had just told him Santa Claus was a Ponzi scheme. His face was pale, hands gripping the edges of his folder like he could fall into it if he held tight enough. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Mom, he began, but Janice cut him off with a raised palm as if he were an unruly toddler at Thanksgiving. We'll draft an amendment, she said to no one in particular. Make Sophia a technical consultant, something non-essential. They'll sign. She said it with such certainty I almost laughed, but I didn't. I sat still in my chair against the wall, same position I'd held all meeting. No coffee cup, no notes, no nameplate, just the clause, just the truth, that was enough. Then the door opened again. It wasn't the buyers. It was Ed Hanley, the board's internal compliance officer. Mid-50s, exec, cardigan under his blazer, always looked like he smelled faintly of toner and moral panic. Never came to signings. Never. Janice. Wade. Boardroom, he said without preamble. Now, Janice blinked. Excuse me? He didn't repeat himself. Wade stood, fumbling with his papers. Janice followed, stiff-legged and quiet. No protest now, no fake laughter. She knew what a summons looked like. Ed paused at the doorway and turned back toward me. Sophia, when we're done, I'd like a word. It wasn't a question. And it wasn't the kind of invitation you decline. I waited. 15 minutes passed. Then 20. People drifted past the glass like confused bees. Rick from marketing peeked in and then backed out immediately. Someone from HR dropped off a folder and didn't make eye contact. Finally, the boardroom door cracked open. Wade came out first. His face blotchy, lips tight. He didn't look at me, just kept walking. I could hear the way his shoes scuffed on the floor like a child being marched to detention. Janice followed, her face frozen in some twisted blend of indignant calm and silent fury, like a woman trying to hold in a scream while posing for a portrait. She walked right past me, not a word, not a glance, and that silence was everything. Ed appeared again in the doorway. Now it's your turn. He led me back into the same room they'd just been shredded in. Except this time, it wasn't chaos, it was clinical. No board members, just Ed. He closed the door and motioned for me to sit. On the table in front of him were 3 printed documents, the clause, my email, and a fresh folder labeled Compliance Escalation Personnel Breach. He didn't say anything for the first minute, just looked at me like a surgeon studying a strange new tumor. Then finally, why didn't you come to us first? It wasn't accusatory. It was genuine, curious. I met his gaze. Would you have listened? He nodded slowly, as if he already knew the answer. We're conducting a full internal review, he said, effective immediately. Your documentation, well, let's just say it speaks volumes. I stayed quiet. He tapped the folder. There's going to be fallout, board-level decisions, possible legal implications. We'll need you to answer some questions under NDA. I know you've been through a lot. I exhaled. I'm fine. He studied me again, then leaned back in his chair. The buyers requested something else too. My stomach ticked once. They want to speak with you, personally. Their lead counsel said, how did he phrase it? She understands the business better than the people who tried to sell it. I didn't react, didn't smile, didn't blink. Ed chuckled softly, the first human sound I'd heard all day. I'd take the call, he said, whatever happens next here. Well, let's just say you're not the one on the chopping block. I stood, collected nothing. Walked out of that glass coffin of a boardroom like I was leaving a wake. Janice was gone. Wade's office door was shut. The whole floor had the eerie quiet of a building after a fire drill, everyone waiting, no one sure if it was over. At my desk, someone had placed a manila envelope. No label, no note. Inside was a copy of the press draft, the one that had erased me, and a single yellow post-it stuck to the cover. Written in careful block letters, history has teeth. Good thing you kept the receipts. I smiled just once. Then I tossed it in the shred bin and walked back to my terminal. The buyers wanted to talk, and for once I had nothing to prove. By Friday morning, the conference room was booked again. But this time there was no fruit tray, no glossy folders with printed agendas, no smiles, no theatrics, just 6 chairs, 3 buyers, 1 lawyer, 1 compliance officer, and me. Janice wasn't there. Wade wasn't invited. And the mood? Surgical. Samuel Hunter waited until everyone had reviewed the final materials, flipping calmly through a series of documents while Ed Hanley sat beside him, nodding occasionally. The air in the room felt denser than usual. Not heavy with dread, just focused. Like everyone knew a verdict was coming and no one was going to interrupt its descent. The contract lay open in front of him. Same clause, same pages. He didn't even raise his voice. You're rescinding our offer, he said, closing the folder with a muted snap. Section 4B was triggered. We'll be notifying the regulatory team and advising our auditors to adjust exposure accordingly. He glanced up once. No flourish, no emotion, just the clean execution of a clause that had been waiting for the right moment to do its job. Ed folded his hands over the table and nodded once. There were no protests, no last-minute scrambles, a kind of panic that had simmered behind the scenes all week. The backdoor calls, the attempted narrative spins, the soft pitches from Janice and Wade to recover their credibility, had finally collapsed under its own weight. 3 hours later, Janice was placed on immediate administrative leave. The official reason cited compliance discrepancies and conduct unbecoming of executive standards. But everyone knew what it meant. The same woman who had spent a decade sculpting her authority out of fear and performance had been undone by 6 words typed in arrogance. Wade didn't even fight it. He tendered his resignation before the end of the day. The internal email was sent from HR at 4:12 p.m. with the usual vague language. Effective immediately, Wade Penwell has chosen to pursue new opportunities. We thank him for his contributions. I read it while sipping coffee at my desk. Didn't even blink. They both vanished like ghosts at sunrise. No farewells, no meetings, no public statements. Just empty offices and silence. Then came the call. It wasn't from Ed. It wasn't even from the buyer's counsel. It was from Reinhardt himself, VP of Global Acquisitions for the buyer group. Thick accent, precise words, very little wasted breath. We won't be proceeding with Stonecliff, he said. But we would like to retain your expertise. I waited. This won't be a formal offer. No job title, no relocation. We'll be assigning you discrete oversight on future integrations. Your insight on internal patterns is unusually valuable. He let that linger. No compliments, just facts. I gave him 1 sentence in return, send it in writing. It arrived within the hour. Confidential consulting agreement. 6-month contract. Stipend nearly double my current salary. Fully remote. I didn't answer immediately. I let it sit in my inbox like a crown no one could take back. By Monday, the HR board had updated the corkboard outside the legal suite. The usual notices were there: harassment policies, ethics hotline flyers, a reminder about cybersecurity training. But now, in the top right corner, pinned neatly behind plastic, was a printout of Janice's email. A bit lazy, aren't we? Underneath it, paperclipped, was a redacted copy of my original forwarded message to the buyer's legal team, highlighted lines, contract clause, timestamp name. It was labeled Exhibit A, Internal Compliance Breach/Investigation Archive, do not remove. I passed by it on my way to the elevator. Janice's office door was shut, her nameplate already unscrewed. The desk inside was bare, not even a stapler left behind. The emptiest space I'd ever seen in a building full of liars. I didn't pause, didn't smirk, didn't whisper some revenge line under my breath like in the movies. I just kept walking. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't scream or fight or swing back. Sometimes it's letting the silence echo loud enough that everyone hears it. The contract spoke. And now, everyone was listening. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit 'em.